Hello, everybody. Welcome to UK Corral, the podcast that reviews nearly every single comic book written by a UK writer ever. I'm your co-host, Mike Allen, as always, I'm joined by...
Oh, that's me.
Yeah, as well. Yeah. And also by...
Nice Man.
That's right. Thanks for joining us, Nice Man. Okay, so this week we are going to be covering Alan Moore's underrated run on Captain Britain. Had any of you ever read this run before this week?
No.
Really? Okay. Because I did pick up the trade paperback a few years back. I don't know if you can see it. And I finally read it. I read it about a year ago, and so I'm actually reading it for the second time now. And I really do enjoy it. I'm a huge fan of Alan Moore, and obviously, and I'm also a huge fan of Alan Davis, and they did collaborate on some issues of Miracle Man, Marvel Man. And so this brings back memories of that. And now one flaw, I guess you could call it that, about this story is Alan Moore did come in mid-story.
Yes.
So there's really no perfect way to start this run. Like, we started on Moore's first issue, but these issues were collected by Marvel under X-Men Archives, and they actually started a few stories earlier, which I did not bother reading. I did not bother reading. I don't know if you guys did. Did you guys read X-Men Archives #1? No?
I read some of what preceded Alan Moore's arrival, just for a comparison, and I wasn't surprised by what I found at all.
It just was what you'd expect. Average?
Just nothing.
Right.
You know, it's just, okay, I think the story is supposed to be this way. The characters are supposed to act this way. They're supposed to say these things. It's just empty. And this is one of the reasons why I never read it, because I was there when Captain Britain was created by Chris Claremont and Herb Trimpe, and all I needed to read was like the first outing to know, no, this is a waste of time. And
yeah.
And so then I just never bothered with it again. And of course, like you, I love Alan Moore. I think Alan Moore's the greatest writer in the history of comics. So maybe if I'd made a bit more effort to realize Alan Moore was writing it, then I would have looked into it. But anyway, it was. But
it is funny, despite Alan Moore's reputation, most people still do not know about this run, which is surprising. But
well, Alan Moore is usually associated with DC when you look at the big companies. So from Marvel, I think a lot of people are shocked to learn that he has written for them. And it's interesting too. I didn't read the first volume of this, so we're reading from volume 2, and there was actually 2 issues that were written by the other author, David Thorpe. And then Alan Moore takes up on A Crooked World. So technically, I think we are actually reading one David Thorpe story if the push should fail before getting into Alan Moore.
I did not. I sent a series of confusing emails, and in one of them, I did say, when you read X-Men Archives #2, start at page, 16, or whatever page it was. So I actually skipped over the first chapter in X-Men Archives #1.
Okay, I found the messages very beguiling, so I just read the 2 anyway. And okay. I will say, before we jump into it, it is at least beneficial for that contrast. Seeing someone like Thorpe, who I'm not familiar with in any capacity, he may have gone on to write some amazing stuff. I'm not sure. I didn't find this Captain Britain run that exciting. And then once we got to Alan Moore, the game significantly changed. Although I do want to ask one thing, because I noticed throughout the credits for every issue, Alan Moore is predominantly not seen as the primary writer. It's also credited to Alan Davis. Now, I'm assuming Alan Davis was the penciler for these issues.
Yeah, I mean, I think that might have just been a courtesy. I don't know if Alan Davis was actually co-plotting with him, but it does say... Yeah, the credits usually read, creators, Alan Moore and Alan Davis. But I think that's more just a courtesy, to be honest, but I'm not sure.
And I know Davis did work a little bit, I think you mentioned, on Miracle Man. And beyond Miracle Man, he also ended up working on Hellblazer quite a bit as well.
Oh, I didn't know that, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm looking forward to that, because I think he is a great artist. He obviously is, to American readers, most famous for Excalibur, right? And then he's kind of one of those guys, though, that he was always one of the better artists, but he was never a superstar, and I'm not really sure why, but maybe he just didn't have the right project. But to me, the most similar artist that I can think of nowadays would be Brian Hitch.
I could see that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But anyway.
I think maybe his art is a little bit gritty, which could be part of it. Doesn't necessarily have the panache of a lot of flashy American superhero comics. But that's up for debate. Maybe we'll discuss about that as we go through the issues.
Sure. So yeah, okay, let's just jump in. So did you want to say anything else about the David Thorpe issues, Adam, or is that it?
They basically set up the plot. So all we have to go on is that Captain Britain is a superhero. He's working with this organization, and it appears that the denizens of this alternative universe, London, are going mad, and they are going to be fed this tea or some sort of drug that's going to somehow nullify their anger, so they become sophisticated and they end up becoming peaceful. But then something strange happens, and then London starts to shift, and I think that's where we start with the actual run by Mr. Moore.
All right. So we're just going to jump in here. So the story that we're reading originally appeared in Marvel Superheroes, number 387 in the UK. And it was reprinted in X-Men Archives number 2, which is where we're reading it from. It's also in the trade paperback I mentioned, as well as there's a Captain Britain omnibus, a trade paperback, another collection. So it's actually fairly readily available. But I can start off summarizing this one. So we start off with a guy looking at a computer screen. We're introduced to England. We see
well, he's part of some sort of organization that's supposed to look after, I guess, superhero or paranormal activity. And he's looking through the monitor, and that's where he notices, as I mentioned, London is going haywire. Like literally, reality is bending. And we should note, as the dialogue says, this is England, but not our England. This is a faraway parallel universe version of England.
And we should mention that although parallel universes existed before this, I really think this is the beginning, as we'll see, of the multiverse idea that Alan Moore explored later with Supreme, with other books, that was then developed further with Spider-Man and Into the Spider-Verse and all that stuff. So anyway, as we said, we're introduced mid-story, and Captain Britain is with, this is, what's her name? Saturnine. Is it pronounced Saturnine or Saturnine?
Well, I've always said the last.
Saturnine?
Yeah, but I could be wrong.
Well, okay, I'll say Saturnine. So he's with Saturnine and another character. What is his name? Oh, Jackdaw. And they're in the middle. They're about to fight a character called the Fury, who's going to feature prominently in this arc. He's kind of the, I don't know, I guess you could say the big bad. He is sort of like a cyborg made of like metal and other things. And Captain Britain is in the middle of fighting him. And like any good Alan Moore story, it is just, quote, a superhero fight, but he kind of puts his little spin on it, just narrating the story in a really interesting way. And in all the fight scenes in the series, giving the character clever things to do to each other. As this is happening, the Fury, which is what the cyborg is called, is murdering his friend. So he makes he makes Jackdaw disappear, or no, he kills Jackdaw.
Yeah.
No, he doesn't. Not Jackdaw.
Really? Oh, that's not Jackdaw. That's who is that? I thought that was Jackdaw. The guy with the ears?
Jackdaw, yes, but he kills another associate of his beforehand. He disintegrates the character whose name is so significant, I completely forget who it is.
It's
Dimples. Poor Dimples. Anyone but Dimples.
Right, yes. He disintegrates Dimples, and then he shoots Jackdaw, and Jackdaw dies in Captain Britain's arms. It's pretty sad, even though I just met Jackdaw 2 pages earlier. So then Captain Britain is furious. So then he tries to attack, what's his name? The Fury. Fury knocks him back. And then we're introduced to a character that I've never seen before, the Mad Jim Jaspers, which is kind of like I guess you could say like a Joker-esque character, like a dandy.
Yeah.
And that's actually the end of the story. There's not really much to relay as far as plot. And as we said, we are joining it mid-story. But I still did find, especially because of the way the story was told, coming in on the perspective of the guy. I believe he's is it Strike? Is he a strike agent? Is that what we find out later? I think so. But anyway, watching on the screen, then, seeing characters talk, and then cutting into the battle. I don't know. I just thought it was, with what he had to do, I thought this issue was great. Adam, what did you think?
This was, for me, oddly reminiscent of Alan Moore's first full issue on Swamp Thing, where he was given that product and he was told basically, do what you can to it. Do whatever you want to with it. So his first form was to eradicate what came before, getting rid of the campy horror elements, rewriting it, restructuring who Swamp Thing's character is. And I feel in maybe a nascent form, that's what's happening here. The elimination of these side characters, these kind of comedy relief characters, might be a gesture Alan Moore is saying of, we're not going to be having this type of comic anymore. We're going to be having something with higher stakes. We're going to have something with a higher literary merit. We don't have time for monkey elves and like chubby, comic relief side characters. We're going to have something else.
Right.
So for me, this was literally Alan Moore just cleaning the slate. And I feel it was very emphatic that way. The ending of this one is not near as shocking as we'll see in the next issue, but I do feel this was Alan Moore just staking his claim on it. It's not perfect because this is an issue that is needing to resolve and tie up loose ends. But I think it does a very fair job of basically siphoning off the ending story points that Alan Moore will not be dealing with his run, primarily speaking, and then engendering some new story threads. I think it's successful. A bit muddled because of the nature of it, but you can still see, especially within the great dialogue and prose, all the signature traits of Alan Moore. It's fantastic.
Right. Paul, what do you think?
Well, I said that I looked at the what came just before, and that's all anybody needs to see. Just to see a bit of what came before and then start reading the Alan Moore stuff. Why do we think Alan Moore is such a good writer? Why is Alan Moore's Captain Britain worth reading? And, the before stuff is just conventional. I mean, it could have been written by a robot. Just the typical cliches and everything else. And then, like you said, Alan Moore came in and it's a bit like his first Swamp Thing. It's like, okay, let me see what I've got here. Let me examine it. All right, now I'm going to put it down in a different place and we'll go from there. And suddenly everything is elevated, everything. In the what word do I want to use? What came before? Let's use that. What came before?
Sure.
Standard dialogue, that's about it. And kind of corny characters. But with Alan Moore, he loves narration. And he's a great writer. So the narration is great because it's intelligent. It's infused with intelligence. The words go together well. The sentences go together well. And it moves the action along. And it gives us a look into the characters, the individual characters. And so suddenly now we're reading something almost kind of literary without being overbearing, without being boring. And suddenly the characters are meaningful. And when you see what he does with crap like this, you think, why can't everybody do this? How hard can it be? Do you not see what makes an excellent comic book? Look, intelligence and putting a fresh take on it, and just writing to a higher standard. So again, a typically long-winded answer from me to a simple question, but that's how I feel about it.
I have to agree. And I think we've talked on this show about the lost art form of thought bubbles. But one of the things that I'm reminded of here is the lost art of narration, right? and prose, I guess you could say. Because go ahead, Paul.
Because in the past, I've criticized Alan Moore for kind of leading the no thought balloons.
Right.
Because I like them when they provide dramatic irony, not exposition.
Right.
But dramatic irony, such as you got the Avengers standing on a stage, but Captain America, Quicksilver, and Scarlet Witch have no idea what Hawkeye's thinking. But we do, because we see the thought balloons. That's great dramatic irony. I like it. I miss it. However, when you see his Captain Britain, you think, okay, we don't need the thought balloons. We've got his narration. And I think, okay, that's all right. So like you were saying, he narrates on a literary level.
Absolutely. And well, I'm just kind of skimming through as we're reading, even just like one line. This is the narration. The superhero is still alive. He has some form of force field around him. There is an 85% probability that he's planning a counterattack. The Fury doesn't worry. It is used to superheroes and their strange powers. So that's an omniscient narrator, but it's also from the point, not the point of view, but from the perspective of how the Fury is seeing this. And it just puts this interesting spin on, if you took it all out, this is just a typical superhero battle. But I just think it makes it so much more interesting. And like you said, Paul, I think it was you that said he is such a good writer that it just makes it, I mean, it's not just action, it's not just plotting, it's writing. He's writing it well. And if this were to be, it makes me think if this were to be adapted into a film or a TV show, I would want to keep that narration, which rarely happens with when they adapt novels. But, you know, like Stanley Kubrick has done it with Barry Lyndon and with, I think, A Clockwork Orange, stuff like that. Goodfellas did it. Like sometimes it works, you know. I don't think there's no one way to do a medium, and I think this proves that narration, when it's done well, can be excellent.
You know, to your point, Mike, you know, a lot of people belabor, why can't they make a good Alan Moore adaptation for film or television? You know, you can talk about the merits of individual films or whatnot, but I think most will agree, on the whole, the adaptations have been largely unsuccessful. They're missing the prose. They're missing the narration. Yes, the story, the narrative itself is important, but it's how it's told. And when it's not told in that same way, it loses what has made it so amazing. I would argue, and I have argued for years, there will never be a successful film adaptation of Watchmen because the narration is part of what makes it so successful.
If I were to do a pitch, here's my pitch. Ready? If I were to take any Alan Moore comic, this is my pitch to a Hollywood studio. Word for word adaptation. That's it. I'm not going to change anything. There's my pitch. Either approve it or don't, but that's all I'm doing. I don't need to adapt it. These are storyboards. The dialogue is the same. The narration is the same. Just how are we going to set up the shot? Open up the comic book, look at the panel, and there's your shot, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, Paul, did you have anything else to add about this issue?
Well, about adaptations, I think.
Okay, what were you going to say?
Well, because my favorite novel is A Passage to India by E.M. Forster.
Okay.
And if something is really great literature, it can't really be transformed to film. That's why when people in Hollywood want to adapt novels, the easiest thing for them to do is to find a kind of novels that are painting by numbers. You know, it's just there, but you can just transplant it from the book to the script. And if something really is literary, I don't think you can. And yet it was David Lean who did Lawrence of Arabia who finally took on the challenge of A Passage to India in the early 80s. But even though he did it, I have never been able to bring myself to watch it. Can you imagine that?
Wow.
I just can't do it because it can't. And just like, you know, like Alan Moore says, you know, you write for comics in a particular way. Watchmen is written in a particular way. Now, I enjoyed the movie, I have to say. As superhero movies go, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good effort. But it's not Alan Moore's Watchmen.
Right.
It can't be. And so, you know, I think I would say, like you, quite honestly, Take Alan Moore's Watchmen, do it word for word, keep the narration, don't change anything, and that's it. But this is the problem when somebody is too good for easy translation. And if somebody's just a paintings by number writer, for example, then okay, you can do it like John Grisham. Sorry, John Grisham.
Right. He's fine. But yeah, I get your point. I agree. One other thing I was going to add to that is that, oh geez, I had a really good point, but I forgot it, but it'll come back to me. But I'm totally I was going to say, I love Swamp Thing. I love Alan Moore's Swamp Thing. I love Grant Morrison's Doom Patrol. There's these new TV shows that have come out in the last few years, and everyone's telling me to watch them. They're like, oh, well, it's inspired by Grant Morrison's Doom Patrol, and Swamp Thing's inspired by Alan Moore's Swamp Thing. If it's not word for word, I have no interest. I don't care. I don't want to watch something that's inspired by Grant Morrison's Doom Patrol. I want to read Grant Morrison's Doom Patrol, and the only reason to see it adapted is to see it's just like a play. When a play is adapted, it is word for word, but you want to see actors bring it to life. I want to see Grant Morrison's Doom Patrol brought to life, not just strip mined for ideas, put it that way.
I would only counter by saying, if you're going to make a film adaptation of any source material, there's a reason you have to adapt it, because you're doing something in that medium that's not being done in the original source material. So what can a movie do to the story that a comic can't do? My only caveat to what you're saying, Mike, is there doesn't need to be an adaptation. Swamp Thing is perfect as it is for Alan Moore's run. Watchmen is perfect. I think Grant Morrison's Animal Man is perfect for what it is.
Yeah.
Technically, yes. You're right. There doesn't need to be an adaptation then.
But I'm also just an old man yelling at clouds. Sure. So, with that said, maybe we should move on to the next issue.
Yes, we have a lot to talk about. So this next story was first appeared in Marvel Superheroes number 388 in August 1982. And Adam, do you want to summarize this one?
I will do the honors of this. Now, this begins the way the last issue ended. We have the Fury looking up, basically calculating the distance between himself and the teapot overhead. Yes, I said teapot because our character, Captain Britain, he was actually escorted out by that villain, Mad Jim Jaspers, in a flying teapot. And it gets weirder from there. One thing I do want to mention, because this isn't really recounting the narrative as much as something that happens throughout the story. In each panel, Jim Jaspers changes. So he wears a different hat, and sometimes his costume changes with each panel. Now, this coincides with a revelation that's going to be told, and I'll just repeat it when we get to it, but he is a superpowered being who has the ability to basically manipulate people's perceptions of reality. So he can't actually manipulate reality itself, but he can convince people that they're seeing things differently than how reality is. And so this is a really great way to convey this kinetic power of his by changing his appearance in each panel, while also showing the instability of this character living up to his mad surname by the fact that he actually has these weird, strange, goofy hats in every single panel. I just wanted to throw that out there. That's a very great story beat that I don't think is captured just by a narrative play-by-play. But anyway, the main thrust of this is that our main character here, Captain Britain, is taken away by Jaspers in this teapot plane, and they are just conversing. In what's conveyed to Captain Britain, it turns out that Jaspers himself has actually been the one who created the machine that bested him, the Fury. There's, of course, some exposition where Captain Britain bemoans the elimination of Dimples and of Jackdaw, but during this course, Mad Jim Jaspers couldn't care less. He just wants to pontificate and talk about how he created the Fury, basically to eliminate all other superpowered beings on the planet, leaving only himself as the sole superpowered entity. And what's really great is during the course of this, they name check particular heroes. Some might have been actual characters, some fictitious, I'm not sure. But one of the characters they name that the Fury actually killed was Miracle Man.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is such a great callback for Alan Moore to do that in the script. Fantastic stuff. With that said, the story continues, and basically, because of his reality warping cognitive powers, he is making Captain Britain hallucinate on this teapot helicopter, making him see all of these figures from his past, including recently deceased individuals, appear, basically chastising him, making him just be driven mad to the point where Captain Britain falls out of the helicopter. I shouldn't even say fall. He completely flees and jumps out the helicopter, plummeting to the ground, and finds himself within the cemetery that happens to be populated by the tombstones of those said dead heroes, including Miracle Man, as we mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Well, at this point, as he's wandering around, he sees a gravesite for Captain UK. Now, it's not quite clear who this is because I didn't read much of this from the earlier run, but it's implied that he's this universe's version of Captain Britain. But it's very appropriate that he's standing before this grave, this dug grave that is empty, because behind him comes the Fury, who blasts him with the laser and disintegrates him. The issue ends with Captain Britain being killed. And the final panel just shows the Captain UK tombstone with this smoke billowing off of it, and the image of a woman. I'm not quite clear who she is. It must have been a backstory character, an associate of Captain Britain's, who is just suddenly overcome with this pain, this fear, somehow understanding that Captain Britain has died. And yeah, that's the end of that issue.
So the scene with the tea party, it reminded me of Alice in Wonderland, right? When Alice has tea with what's his name?
The Mad Hatter. He even says, "I'm mad as a hatter." At that point.
Right. And we have what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages of mostly just talking, but it's all great, And I mean, I don't know, what can I say about it? We haven't even talked about Alan Davis's art, and I love Alan Davis's art here. I think obviously as time went by, he did get better, but I like how in this early stage his inks are little bit rougher, a little bit, and I like that quality about it. But we can see that even at this stage, he's a great artist. So I have nothing but good things to say about this one. I loved it. Nice Man, what did you think?
So when Alan Moore is working on something, no stone is left unturned, right?
Right.
His brain is always thinking. And I think the artists appreciate that. So as you said, he plummets to the graveyard. And then, not just any old graveyard, they list the characters. And you see Miracle Man. It's a nice touch. Another name listed there is Garth on the left. And Garth is one of the first hero strips I ever read as a little kid.
Really? Okay.
In the newspaper. I think it was drawn by Frank Bellamy, who was great. And so every day in the newspaper, I would see Garth, like 3 panels, It's a daily strip. And then I took some scissors and I kept those pages, and then I cut out the Garth strips, and then I kind of glued them in a scrapbook. So I had a Garth comic book. So for me, seeing Garth there was very touching. So, Alan Moore, great attention to detail. Maybe Alan Davis too. We can't say Alan Moore, can't give him credit for every single thing, I guess. And, even here, Captain Britain isn't just killed. He's obliterated.
There's no doubt.
Absolutely obliterated. Now, in the hands of a lesser writer, I guess there wouldn't be too much more to it than that, because without trying to give away too much of what's coming, of course, there's a resurrection, but it's the way it's done. But Alan Moore uses it to entertain us in other ways. The whole nature of the resurrection is thoroughly entertaining and stimulating. And he even gets us to ruminate on death and what happens when we die.
Mhm.
And so you've got this kind of superheroes, supervillainy stuff going on. But as with all good writers, that's just the surface. You know what I mean? There's a whole lot more to get our attention, to stimulate us. In the hands of lesser writers, such as what came before this run, there isn't. It's just what you see. You know, there really isn't much more than that, and bravado talk and this and that. No, Captain Britain has been obliterated, so we're thinking, wow, just how is he going to get resurrected from this? There's like almost nothing left of him. And at the same time, Alan Moore's talking to us, saying, you know, what do you think about dying? What do you think? Where do you think we go when we die? Do we go anywhere? What's the nature of death? Is it this? Is it that? So he's got this whole subtext going on, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's just wonderful. It really is wonderful. And I do think he's the best writer, but other great writers who manage to make you think and feel on different levels, like Grant Morrison, and among the American writers, Steve Gerber used to do it for me, Don McGregor, you know, to a point, and Steve Englehart also to a point. They always got me to think and feel on more than just what I was seeing. And so anyway, I should always apologize for the long-windedness.
No, we don't have to apologize to us.
But I can say one mildly negative thing is going to make you squirm, as it did last time. I said this last time, I think. I don't really like Alan Davis art too much.
I think you've mentioned this before. Yeah.
I like it to a point, but early on you can see his Neil Adams influence and you can see his John Byrne influence. And he never really comes an Alan Davis. It's like, for me, it's like a second-rate John Byrne and a second-rate Neil Adams put together.
Okay.
It's never convincing.
I see the color going to Mike's face right now.
I'm going to have to retort. I don't want to spend too much time at this point, but I've been reading comics for a long time. And I know Neil Adams and I know John Byrne, and I have never, ever associated Alan Davis with either of those two, honestly.
Do you see on the page right now on the bottom row, on the left panel of the four, there's a close-up on a woman's face. Do you see that?
Yeah.
With the glasses, and it's at a certain angle and everything. That's John Byrne. That's a John Byrne type image.
But here's the thing. Even if you want to say that, I mean, there's definitely artists like Yannick Paquette who grew up liking John Byrne as well. Maybe Alan Davis grew up liking John Byrne.
Yeah.
But there are artists that did grow up liking him that have far eclipsed him. And I think Yannick Paquette has, and I think Alan Davis has. Like, I think Alan Davis is so much better an artist than John Byrne that they're not even comparable. Honestly. I think, and here's the thing is, this isn't even Alan Davis's best work. He does get better. The only negative criticism, or the only negative thing I have to say about Alan Davis is that when he did Batman with Mike W. Barr, I don't think he was quite right, the right fit for Batman at that time. He would have been perfect for Superman maybe, but not Batman. But I think for this, I think he is absolutely perfect. And for Miracle Man, I thought he was perfect. Honestly, I thought he was perfect. Other than Gary Leach. Gary Leach is the quintessential Miracle Man artist. Then Alan Davis. And then who's the other one? Is it John Totalman? The one
yes.
Oh, this is so good. But anyway, that's another conversation. We'll talk more as we go. Okay, we got a lot to talk about. We got to jump to,
I just want to jump in quickly because I didn't really give.
Go ahead.
No, it's okay. I just want to mention two things. One, it's interesting that Nice Man brought up Garth, because actually this iteration, this costume of Captain Britain's was partially inspired by Garth. So I just thought that was a really nice full circle moment acknowledging that. And, there's a lot of themes going on here. Was touched upon about death being one, these sort of philosophical considerations of what happens when we die. And that's going to come more into play for the next issue. But for this one, it's about shame and guilt. Captain Britain is going through this menagerie of Jim Jasper's mind. He's being manipulated, but he's being encroached by nothing but guilt and shame. And I think that's a main theme happening here, where that boisterousness, that sort of bravado that you mentioned, is absent here. We are deconstructing Captain Britain's character. This is the first step of it. So we are psychologically deconstructing him, and then the very end of the issue, physically deconstructed.
Yes.
And what comes next?
Good
the
point.
rebuilding.
All right. Go ahead, Paul.
Title of the next issue could have been The Anatomy Lesson.
Absolutely. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Good point. Good point. Actually, Paul, this is a longer one, but do you want to summarize this one, the next one?
Let's see if I can do it justice. I will. Otherwise, I will hand it over to you. Let me just go to it and let's see. I've just got to get to one more page.
Oh, we should mention, I believe this is the first issue of Daredevils that this comes from.
Yes, it's a little bit confusing, but it's not Daredevil, it's Daredevils, using the same logo. And this series featured stories with Spider-Man, Daredevil, and Captain Britain. Obviously, the first two were American reprints, and the last one was UK original. But
sorry.
Go ahead, Paul. You queued up there?
The synopsis cannot possibly do it justice.
Okay.
Because,
and that goes for all these issues, but anyway.
I think, again, if the writing were just standard stuff, then I think a synopsis can do it justice. But when you have writing as good as Alan Moore's, I don't think it can. So we have some particular kind of laboratory populated by a couple of characters, looks like a father-daughter, and they have a few bones of Captain Britain. A few bones. That's all that's left of him. And from this, they are going to resurrect him from these few bones. The young female is going to resurrect his body from this, and the older male is going to resurrect his mind and his, very life. Those are the two assignments. And, this takes time. And so while this takes time and step by step by step, it gives Alan Moore the perfect opportunity to examine the history of Brian Braddock, who he was as a young man, and what life he got into as an adult, and how he came to be Captain Britain. And so perfect for anybody that wasn't there at the beginning, and many people were not. And it also buys time, because we need to get a sense that this resurrection is no quick fix, so we have to do something while this is taking place. It also gives opportunity to explore the relationship between the male and the female, and their individual characters as well. So there's a lot going on, but it's all very clear, I think, very well told. And further on, we finally get to the point where the body has been resurrected. And now the question is, will the mind function? Will the memories be okay? And he needs a soul, and that's got to come from somewhere. So this is all part of the conversation that's going on between the male and the female, really, about the nature. Well, also in the narration that Alan Moore provides about the nature of life and death, and what composes life, how is life defined. A nice little touch here is that you can tell, I think, that Alan Moore wanted to get rid of any characters that he didn't appreciate, and coincidentally that we don't appreciate as well. One of them being the noble elf Jack Dore. Yes, sadly he will not be coming back from the dead, and we think, oh, great, that's great. We don't need this kind of character. We really don't. Poor little Jack Dore. If only I had been able to risk saving him without endangering the chances of saving Captain Britain himself. If spoken by the older male.
It's great.
So, here we are, and now that we come to the part where can we get life back into him, and this is where we learn that there is a pool of being, and the is it the male or the female? I can't quite tell here. Has to pluck the spirit from the pool of being. Let it raise aloft as a pulsing jewel of life and consciousness, separated from its mortal shell by the merest heartbeat. Let there be a joining, and then it is the older male, because he plunges it into Captain Britain. Plunges it. Let there be life is the big word balloon, and and then he's alive. And where is he? He's back on Darkmoor, September the 8th, 1982. He's alive on Darkmoor. And so this is where I think he went down, didn't he? And on Darkmoor. So
I believe so, yeah.
He thinks that he's was on a nightmare world, and
sorry, he was in the graveyard. Now he's home. Right.
And you see, and Alan Moore shows us the person who is Captain Britain is not just a superhero with spouting, bravado. He's the person. So he grabs hold of one of the jutting rocks and says, thank God I'm home. It's not all, hey, I'm home.
Right.
No, thank God I'm home. Like any whimpering one of us would be saying. And to finish it off, Alan Moore gives us the twist where we learn that the older male who has revived him has different forms. And this is just one of them. He's also revealed to have the form of Merlin, and a whole bunch of different forms. So that's something, a great twist that we've just learned about this character. And it just adds to the pot. Alan Moore is always adding layer after layer after layer, but it's never too complicated, never. I think his mind just works on different levels. He's got a multiverse in his brain. And he's able to convey it, to the readers in a way that's not confusing. And for the last time, I'll say, again, comparing it to what came before, there is no comparison. None. There's none of this in what came before.
I've got to say, I do believe that the way to be a good writer is to be a good rewriter. However, when you're starting with the mind of Alan Moore, you're already 100 levels above everyone else working. And it's like you said about all these layers that he's giving and characters he's introducing, perspectives he's introducing. Who else would think to not just have the main character regrown and rebuilt this way, but to have two characters kind of not arguing, but discussing what's going to happen, and the fact that there's a mission for him that he doesn't know about, and at the end the girl says, poor thing, poor doomed thing. It's like you said, there's the dramatic irony, but it's also a way to refresh the audience's memory about his history and probably put a new spin on it. Like, it's just brilliant. And again, it's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pages. It's just brilliant. I love it. Adam, what do you think?
I can't say too much more than what's already been stated. It is great. As mentioned, there is a lot of rumination, not only just about death, but what a life is. what constitutes an existence? It's just not the physicality. Obviously, Merlin, or this entity that has a form of Merlin, talks about the other elements that make up a life: experience, sensation, drive, and soul. There's a lot of philosophy that's happening within these books, as there always is with Alan Moore. But I think most crucial of all, we have a story that I will say, I think maybe works against something that you had said earlier, Mike, that there's no necessarily great jumping on point. I think this could be it. I think this is essentially the anatomy lesson as pointed out to earlier. I think this is just a case where we have a clear projection of what sort of story we might tell. Yes, we have allusions to the past, but you don't necessarily need to know all of that. Just that there is this history. We have given you everything you need to know about who Captain Britain is and an idea of what's going to happen going forward. Plenty of mysteries about what his lineage is in terms of his connection to Merlin and the sources of power. But in the end, it's not about a narrative thrust in that way. It's about exploring what makes a life, what makes a person. And as Nice Man said, the most humanizing aspect of all, when Captain Britain returns to Darkmoor and he just wraps his arm around that stone and starts crying. That's the most human moment in a superhero comic that I recall seeing in quite some time. And with the exception of maybe a few other stories by Moore and Grant Morrison, I can't think of any more humanizing depiction of a superhero than that moment. And I think it's brilliant for that. And also, in terms of a plot, I'm intrigued to know what is this intention Merlin and Roma have for Captain Britain, what will go forward, and what's going to happen now that he's resurrected. And the question that is raised, and it's not answered until the next issue, how thorough of a recreation was he, and how damaged is he coming back?
I also have to give a sample of the text here. So the bad guy says, "Let us see what images glide like phosphorescent fish through the depths of one man's lifetime. Let us seek to answer that most vast of questions. Who was Brian Braddock?" Anyway, it's just amazing. Like, what a great way to set up the story, Oh,
and
perfect.
Even one other thing too, like Mike, I think we're using terminology that we're so used to, because you even said the bad guy says this Merlin character, if he is Merlin, you can see him as an antagonist, but he's not necessarily. He's a force.
Right.
And, it's interesting that there is sort of a motif of characters being physically deconstructed and reconstructed in Moore's work. Like, we've made comparisons to Swamp Thing. I know certainly Miracle Man, which elicits a comparison for this, but I think this might be a crystallization. We've seen it happen before in Miracle Man. I think it's done a little bit better here. And I think we're going to see its apex when it comes to his run on Swamp Thing.
Sure. Yep.
Can you just imagine that Len Wein saw at DC, and being an editor at DC, he must have read some of Alan Moore's stuff like this, and he thought, okay, I've got to get this guy. I got to get this guy on Swamp Thing and other stuff, Great decision.
Best decision he ever made.
Yep.
Yes.
Anyway, okay, so now that is the contents of X-Men Archives number 2. There was another story that we skipped. There was a fill-in. Did you read that one, Adam?
No, I completely missed it.
Because I believe there was another one after that. It was by, I think it was Paul Thorpe or whoever, but I started to read it. I'm like, what the hell is this? Then I read the credits, like, oh, it's not Alan Moore. So I just skipped it. So we're going to jump directly to X-Men Archives number 3, which starts off with a reprint of the Daredevils number 2. This is from, the date's not on here, but it's 1982. So we jump back. Okay, so now first prologue, the anxiety attack hits her. So this character, of course, I already forget who this is. Oh, is this the psychic?
I believe this is the character who we saw in the previous issue,
right.
issue to that, who had that sort of what do you call it? That Obi-Wan Kenobi moment where he felt the pain and suffering of a whole planet dying. Here she's feeling the death of Captain Marvel.
Right.
Or I keep saying Captain Marvel. My
Captain
apologies. It's
Britain.
because I'm still amazed to see Alan Moore writing for Marvel. My apologies.
Yeah. And then we cut over to Fury, and Fury never gives up. Then we cut over to the two characters from the previous issue, and they're kind of commenting, our rebuilding of Captain Britain was a success. He's alive and he's back on his own Earth. And then I love this, a success possibly, Roma. It is too early to say certain. To say certainly, we rebuilt his body quite adequately, but his mind, did we do as much for his mind? He might be insane, Roma. We shall see. I love it, right? So then we again talk about starting fresh. Now Captain Britain is going back to, again, I never read these stories, I don't think, but he's going back to his former headquarters, which he thought had been destroyed in a previous, it just sounds so stupid, and a team up with Captain America. It was probably when Captain Britain was in Marvel Team Up or one of those stories. I don't know which one. Maybe I think he was in an issue of Captain America, honestly, but I didn't read that one. And I love how he comes up and Alan Moore does the trick here where we see, it's not as perfectly done as it's done in future comics, but we see a kind of wide shot that's split into two panels. So Captain Britain is standing between two panels, and on the left we see what the cab driver sees, and on the right we see what he sees. And the cab driver sees like the mansion is all destroyed, but Captain Britain sees that it's actually still there. And he's like, Braddock Manor in one piece, but it was bombed to the ground. And later on we're going to find out that it was all just an illusion, right? But it's just what a brilliant way to introduce it. And again, I've seen like Dave Gibbons did it better in Watchmen, but this is still a great idea, a great way to introduce this idea. So then he goes back into his manor, and let's see here. This is a character named Emma Collins is there. So again, these are all characters from the previous iterations of Captain Britain that we haven't talked about. So then he's walking through the manor, and he basically comes across like a memory, one of his own memories that we kind of touched on in the previous issue of him in his car with a woman. And just as he's going up to the memory, the memory vanishes. And this is where he has a memory of while he was with this girl, his parents died. So it's kind of tragic. He's wandering through his mansion, and he comes across these are his parents, right? The skeletons of his parents.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So again, there's a little bit of horror there. It's really well done. And he's like, I wanted to be dead like you. I wanted us to be together. Then he comes across, who is this here? Oh, Mastermind. He's like, I tried to kill you once before, but you wouldn't let me. Things are different now. You're older now. Mastermind, of course. It's fitting that you should be the one to kill me, isn't it? Again, I don't even know who this character is, but it just shows that Alan Moore, as we said, could be dropped into any comic and just made it better, right? So now he's getting frustrated with everything, and he's like, okay, that's it. I'm going to start kicking ass. So he rips his outer clothes off, and he starts attacking this guy, Mastermind. And then all of a sudden, he comes across this machine this is what's creating the illusion, I believe, right? Or this is what's been messing with him. So he rips it, and then all of a sudden he's in this cavern. And he's like, the cavern is a vast flooded with an eerie submarine light. I don't know how to pronounce this. I need someone who's a better reader than me. Stalactites? Yeah. Drip from the ceiling, stalactites crushed with circuitry. And there's a lot to summarize here, but what is it that he remembers here?
Essentially, there was this computer that gained sentience that it appears like Captain Britain had a hand in creating or engineering. And that's what eventually became Mastermind, who is more of a holographic projection of this system. In fact, Mastermind is not entering into here to follow and pursue because he's concerned that his laser would do damage to the circuitry in here.
All I can say is that, what a way to fill 5 pages. Like, it's just brilliant, that he has this whole idea, and then I don't know, it's just brilliant. It's genius. And then he basically settles back in, and now he's going to go on to the next little mini adventure. He sits down to have a drink, and then the phone rings. And even though a phone ringing is not really a cliffhanger, we're excited because we know that whatever Alan Moore has planned, it's going to be great, right? So another great issue. What did you think, Nice Man?
What do you think I thought?
I think you thought it was genius. Alan Moore is the greatest writer in superhero history, comics history. But I don't know what else.
Well, the things that most stood out to me were with the parents. First, there are two things. The parents as skeletons. Now, we could say this is like a horror scene because they're skeletons. But Alan Moore's a very, very naturalistic writer, I think. That's the correct thing to say. You know, his dialogue always rings true, and it always brings character to whatever person is saying whatever they're saying. It always conveys character. They're not just words. So here we have two skeletons, scantily clad skeletons. One the mother, one the father. And, you know, their dialogue is great. They have dialogue, you know. Couldn't you have come sooner? You know, how we look forward to seeing you, especially now we're dead.
Uh-huh.
Especially now we're dead. Couldn't you have come sooner? It's lonely being dead. And you think, it makes you stop and think. You read and think at the same time, you know?
Mhm.
You read and think, well, I guess it is lonely being dead, isn't it?
Mhm.
And then that was the father, right? And the mother skeleton is like, no, you know, leave the lad alone. He's got his own life to lead. I expect he's been with that girl, that Valerie. He's got no time for dead people.
Uh-huh.
This is comedy. This is comedy gold. And then, I'm sorry, but I just love this dialogue. So I've got to say, he says, just like a woman, eh, Brian? Keep telling her. Elizabeth, I say, we're dead now. Nobody expects us to keep up appearances now that we're dead. And, you know, it's a tragic scene, a horrific scene, and a comedic scene,
Mhm.
all at the same time.
Mhm.
And then, if that wasn't entertaining enough, we go on and, you know, he rips apart the piece of equipment because behind it should be the brains of the operation. And what does he find? He finds the cavern, like you said, with the stalactites. I believe the pronunciation is all right. But they're not, actually. They're actually part of the artificial intelligence system. They look like stalactites, but they're part of the artificial intelligence system. And how wonderful is that? And just with everything else, it's not enough for there to be an AI system. It has its own personality, you know, and it's under threat. So what does he say? Give me a chance, Brian. I'm sorry I tried to kill you. Sorry I killed your parents. It's like a Monty Python sketch, you know, from the Holy Grail. But I had to do it, don't you see? It was survival to live, Brian, and so on and so on. And he's getting in, the AI is getting in a worse and worse state. And so finally he says, you know, I'm not bad, Brian. Not really bad. You know, it's like begging for his life now. What are you doing, Brian? I thought we had a bargain. I thought we were friends. Just put that plate back, Brian. Doesn't it remind you of a little bit of Hal?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm
Absolutely.
sorry. I can't do that. Yeah, it has personality. Everything has personality. Everything, even skeletons.
Yeah.
You know, it could have come sooner, especially now that we're dead. You know, so.
No, you're absolutely right. Even like the one panel where he's like, I can grow now. Isn't that clever? I found it could absorb minerals from the ground. And it's like the moment that he creates a character, he just inhabits it and he knows exactly how they think. It's amazing.
Yes. And the words he uses, they just so illuminate the character. Never just a talking head, you know?
Right.
There's also this great continuation too. I just want to say about the two main antagonists, I guess you would call them so far in Moore's run, which are Mad Jim Jaspers and Fury. Fury is this augmentation of a synthetic and organic life form, basically a sentinel that's made just to kill all superheroes from that dimension. Here we're seeing this synthesis of this machine life as a sentient being absorbing the natural world, absorbing these minerals and these rock formations under the ground. So we see this sort of parallel to that. And also because Mad Jim Jaspers can basically create these sort of hallucinations or manipulate the idea of people's realities, we see that as well with this computer projecting these holograms and these graphics. So he's being projected this image of his parents' skeletons talking back to him. It's very interesting to see that callback to those previous antagonists being resolved here through actual action through Captain Britain. We're seeing a progression of his character where before he was defeated by both of them in their own way, one from running away from Mad Jim Jaspers and the other being literally disintegrated by the Fury. Here, he's taking action and he's getting some sort of restitution for the death of his parents. It's also incredible to consider the fact that this comic is not afraid to broach upon subjects of guilt over parental death. And, maybe trigger warning, but, this is even a moment in here where Captain Britain talks about taking his own life. Because, yes, he would want to join his parents. It could be handled in a very bad, very edgy way that takes away from any sort of maturity. But no, it's handled with nuance and grace. And you get this sense of a character being driven to the edge of his capabilities to actually consider taking his own life. Again, another thing that extremely humanizes Captain Britain compared to like the bevy of braggadocio, like infused superheroes that we're used to seeing. And for that, I think that's what makes this particular issue stand out so much for me. While I do think the reveal of the mansion might be a bit contrived, I think what it accomplishes in the end more than makes up for that.
Yeah. I'm loving this again, and if I had been reading Captain Britain all along, I would know more of these characters. But even though I don't know them, it's so perfectly executed. It's great. I love it. Okay, now we're gonna jump to the next one. I believe, is it your turn, Adam?
Yes, I'll take the reins for this one.
Sure.
Now, for this particular issue, we continue off where the previous issue had ended, and that is, of course, with a phone call that is before a brief interruption where we see a bald man entering a theater which is presenting Dr. Destiny, Master of the Mind. Basically, a stage show where somebody is just presenting psychic abilities. Now, of course, a cynic like myself assumes that this is just some sort of ruse or some basic, like, well, I guess you could say scam show. But apparently this person on stage does genuinely exhibit psychic abilities, because this bald man approaches and asks, "What have I got in my pocket?" The psychic goes, "Well, let me see, you've got a, oh God." And that's because he understands this masked man, this bald man, I should say, has a gun in his hand and he assassinates this individual. So that is basically the prologue for this story. Then we get to the continuing narrative where Captain Britain picks up the phone, and he's actually called by the name Captain Britain. He's trying to figure out who this could be. And then he realizes it's Betsy, his sister, Betsy Braddock. Now, I'm not quite clear, but I know she is a character in Marvel continuity. Was she Psylocke?
She's Psylocke, yes.
Okay, I thought so. Okay.
Right. But this is pre-Asian Psylocke. So to be fair, she became a member of X-Men when she was a Caucasian still. Then when Jim Lee took over, she switched bodies and became Asian.
Okay, so that explains my extreme confusion. Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Okay, because comic books. Anyway, with that said, they basically agreed to meet, and it is revealed that his sister actually also is somewhat of a precognitive entity. She also has psychic abilities and is part of an organization of people who also exhibit such traits. Anyway, as they all understand, there is somebody who's going off to assassinate people with these abilities, and that is indeed what she's going to meet her brother, Captain Britain, about at and I love the title of this, a McBurgers.
Yeah, right.
There's this really great moment, and again, to the credit of the artist, this is done so well without dialogue. You have the pair of characters entering this facility. They haven't seen each other in years, and they're looking about, trying to figure out who the other one could possibly be. Their eyes meet, they kind of squint and scrutinize one another, and there's these great panels of what they looked like years and years ago, and they both suddenly realize, wait, it is the other person. Of course, Brian, aka Captain Britain, is a big buff guy now, so she didn't recognize him, and Betsy has purple hair because it is 1983. They have a really great human conversation where they catch up about stuff. And in the course of this great moment of characterization where you really do get a sense of who Betsy is, and you get more of a human feeling about Brian or Captain Britain because you get a fleshing out of his personality. We also get, of course, plot points. So as mentioned, Betsy is precognitive and telepath, and she's actually part of the Psi division for Strike, that organization Mike referred to before. And I believe Strike is essentially the UK version of S.H.I.E.L.D.
As far as I know, yeah.
Okay. And so essentially what's happening is their operatives and other people with these abilities are being assassinated, and they are asking Captain Britain for help. Now, at the same time, the same bald man that we've seen from the prologue who assassinated the psychic on stage is entering into a comic book shop called Forbidden Planet, where he pulls out this apparatus, sort of prong, and he stabs someone in the back of the head. So it is very much implied she is somebody with psychic abilities. She is now assassinated, and Betsy, in this great panel, just has this sort of tier of psychic energy emitting from her head, showing that she's having this empathetic, almost seizure of pain, feeling her compatriot be murdered. The people in the restaurant are seeing her essentially have a seizure and are asking her to leave. But of course, Brian tactfully exits to the bathroom and returns in his Captain Britain garb and flies away with his sister. Now, because she knows where this event took place, because again, she's telepathic and has precognitive capabilities, she tells Captain Britain where to go, and they end up going to this comic book shop where the bald assassin is going to continue to attempt to kill other people who are psychics at this establishment. Of course, at that time, Captain Britain comes in and he engages with the bald assailant, only for him to take off his mask and reveal Guy Fawkes. He's actually a character named Slaymaster, who I have to admit I have not heard of before, but apparently they have tangled in the past, and the issue ends with the promise of their ensuing battle about to take place in the following issue.
And before you say anything, Nice Man, there's two things I've got to mention, and Adam, you did address them. The page where he sees Betsy and they recognize each other, they're trying to recognize each other, is so brilliant, because I've never ever seen that done in a comic or in a movie or anywhere. But it's true, if you had seen someone, and I don't know how long it's been, but long enough that they physically look different, they're older, their hair is different, even though they're brother and sister, I just thought that was brilliant. It's Alan Moore and Alan Davis, like, what a brilliant use of the medium. I also like when Slaymaster stabs the woman in the back of the head, she actually falls, and then there's a panel in between of Betsy Braddock feeling the pain of the psychic. Then on the panel below, she lands at his feet in the panel below. Again, that's a great page right there. And that shows you can't talk about adapting comics. You know, the way the comics are read sometimes digitally, they'll have like one panel, then it'll zoom into the next panel, then the next panel. A page like this, you can't do that. You have to see the whole panel, the whole page as a whole. So I think it's brilliant. But anyway, Nice Man, what do you think?
This is a very, very sentimental chapter for me, because when this story was written, that's my comic book store.
What? Really?
In Denmark Street. She even says to him, they're killing in Denmark Street, because Forbidden Planet was located on Denmark Street.
Wow. So this is is this a famous store?
Oh yeah, because in the mid 70s, it used to be the store that we went to used to be called Dark They Were and Golden Eyed, which was a line from a Ray Bradbury story. Mm-hmm. And I was there on the day where a whole load of guys came in with gray kind of overcoats and hats, and they just walked in. They didn't say anything. they had some kind of cases with them, and they started loading up the cases with the paperbacks from the shelves. And the guy who was running the store at the time tried to stop them, but couldn't stop them. So obviously that was the beginning of the end for Dark They Were and Golden Eyed. And in its wake came Forbidden Planet. And Forbidden Planet opened on Denmark Street. And so, that's where I used to go. And myself and a whole kind of like a little gang of comic book guys, we used to meet up in London, like once a month and so on, including like Frank Plowright and Hass Yusuf and Dave Hornsby. Frank and Hass, I think maybe Dave too, used to do the annual conventions in England and then later in Scotland, and Steve Whitaker as well. So when I read this and he said, Denmark Street, Forbidden Planet, and it's 1982 or so. Yeah, that's my store at that time. Yes,
that's great.
Yep.
Interesting.
So obviously, that's another angle for me personally. And I all the things that you've said about it, I like about it too, of course.
Excellent. Again, another what could have been a typical story, just done in a different way. I also love the opening page. Yes, what have I got in my pocket? Well, let me see. You've got oh God, no, blam, genius. And more, one thing he's brilliant at is the fear people have when they know they're about to either get killed or get harmed or something, or even worse. But he's just, he's brilliant at everything he does, but that's another thing I've noticed. It's also funny, I got to make a quick point. There's always going to be that contrarian undercurrent of people that Alan Moore's not that good. In this 5-page story, he does things, he probably does more creative things on one page than the typical American comic would have done on the entire issue. And I'm not, that's not an exaggeration. Just the scene of the recognition is something I'd never seen before. Just the scene of the panel splitting up the other two panels is something I maybe saw from Neil Adams, but it was pretty rare. And, we can go through the whole story again and find little things, but even just him commenting on his helmet, there's just such an intelligence going on in every aspect of the story. I just think it's pointless to kind of dismiss it. Oh, he's not that good. Len Wein's Swamp Thing was better. Yeah, sure it was. Sure it was, right? But anyway, that's all I'll say about that. No offense to Len Wein. Okay, so Paul, do you want to take the next one? Daredevils number 4?
Let's see. And I was going to mention that, I'm not sure how good it is or not to compare Alan Moore to Tennessee Williams.
Sure. Why not?
Any time I've seen a Tennessee Williams play, I come away thinking and feeling that not one word is wasted.
Mm-hmm.
Not one. You can't leave the play if you're watching it as a play, or you can't leave your TV screen. And that's it. Not one word, not one action, not one scene. Nothing is wasted. Mm-hmm. And I think really it's very much like that with Alan Moore stuff,
Mm-hmm.
So here we have recognition that Captain Britain of the Slaymaster, and the Slaymaster thought that Captain Britain was dead, and they thought each other was dead, and of course they're not, and now they're getting ready for an all-out battle. And that's why this one is called Killing Ground. And here I should say how much I like the Alan Davis artwork.
Mm.
You see these 5 panels across the top, Slaymaster, Captain Britain, Slaymaster, Captain Britain, Slaymaster, as they're edging closer and closer to battle. And you get those are really, really well done. So there they are in battle. And, we're expecting, what are we expecting really? Just a big slugfest. But while the battle is going on, we're treated to the thoughts of Betsy Braddock.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just a battle where, yeah, I'm, take that. And, no, it's more interesting to see the battle in the background and to be with Betsy Braddock as she's witnessing it. I think I don't want to hear, just idiots. Well, they're not idiots, sorry. but superhero, supervillain just talking smack to each other and, exposition and this and that. I'd rather be with Betsy Braddock's thoughts. And so what's going on with her thoughts? Anything in particular? She hopes that he kills him. It's like, wow, I hope you subdue him. I hope you kill him the way he killed my friends. Okay, we can relate to this because, this is how human beings think and so on. So again, it's funny because there is a big brawl going on here, but we're with the thoughts of Betsy Braddock and there's a fellow psychic also there in the store. And now they're communicating with each other about this. So really, what is the main action here? Is it the fight or is it the communication between these telepaths? And I think it's the communication between the telepaths. I think Alan Moore is saying, okay, we've seen superhero, supervillain battles, they're a dime a dozen, really.
Mm-hmm.
What is more interesting here? That's the telepathic communication. So then finally, one of them gets tossed through the window of Forbidden Planet, smashes the window of Forbidden Planet. But let's not get too serious and boring about this, because what does one of the people say in the comic book store in Forbidden Planet? Oh God, are you going to throw him through the window? You are. Let me get this copy of X-Men 137. It's valuable. It's smashed. The glass is smashed, and this. Oh well. Never mind. Cover slightly worn, reduced to clear. Great, isn't it great? And you see it, and again, it pinpoints, that period of time, and what comics were considered, very valuable at that time, and it was X-Men 137. So anyway, Slaymaster fakes, goes possum-like. Captain Britain thinks that Slaymaster's out conscious, but he's not. He's faking so he can stick a particular needle kind of point. I don't know what this is exactly. A needle is probably the best word I can come up with. Into Captain Britain. So it's pierced his little force field, because he has a force field that protects him. But this device is strong enough to penetrate the force field and knock Captain Britain down. He's down for the count. And I still like even hear the dialogue from Slaymaster. The one, meaning the sharp point, the one between your fourth and fifth ribs at the moment bears the regrettably tasteless name of a jazzler.
Yeah.
Regrettably tasteless name of a jazzler. So he's still got a literary conscience, Slaymaster. He's very conscious of his words and how he uses them. So Captain Britain is down for the count, and then I think you have to take over from me because I've just lost my page.
Okay, I'll take over. So he's down for the count, and then the Slaymaster's like basically narrating as Captain Britain is knocked out. He's like, well, you could just pull it out, but as I think you'll find, even such a simple task is beyond your current level of coordination. But then, of course, Captain Britain does manage to break the needle, and then Slaymaster says, I'm impressed. Then Captain Britain punches him, and he goes flying. But then he flies. Oh, and I love this scene because the not spectators, what are they called? Bystanders on the ground are like, wow,
yeah.
Look at that leap. That's a world record. He isn't leaping. He's flying. My mother warned me this would happen if I didn't stop reading comics. Just a little bit of humor, but they're watching this as it's happening, which I love. I love this scene here where basically time comes to a standstill, and we enter into their thoughts. And the narration's, well, that's not actually their thoughts, it's narration. But it's like, but the narration says, and he's only really using one arm. Oh, it is narration. I just noticed that. The muscles on his left arm are incredibly well developed, but he's not using it. Is he showing off, or the hand raises? Even without a jazzler, the force field must be. So now we're in Slaymaster's thoughts. It must be breachable, a weak spot, a nerve center, and then he focuses in on his shoulder. Just one square centimeter of vulnerability. The shoulder. I thought so. Then he strikes, and there's a brief moment of nothing, and then Captain Britain recoils in pain. And I love how this guy just keeps talking. He completely remains calm. Now he's using that injured shoulder. Now he's attacking the shoulder because he's weak there. But then Captain Britain comes back, and he's punching. Just like any superhero battle, but just done much better. And then Slaymaster looks up. Captain, I congratulate. And in his mind, that's Betsy narrating. Hit him. Then he hits him, knocks him out. That's the end of the fight. He's down for the count. And then Captain Britain. Sorry, go ahead.
This is obtained thanks to comic books.
Yes. I should have mentioned that. Yeah, because he. So what is it? He uses them to just confuse him, right?
Well, the precogs and telepaths do.
Yes. See that. Go ahead.
They lift the comic books from behind the broken glass, and hundreds of comic books slam into Slaymaster's face, and because they do, he's temporarily blinded. So that's the time to hit him hard. So it's all thanks to the comic books from Forbidden Planet.
Mm-hmm. A little bit of comedy in there. See, this is the thing is that, and I'm going to give a little bit of criticism to Alan Davis's art. A lot of these panels are extreme close-ups of faces, and that particular sequence, in my opinion, was not clearly told, because even though I did read it, I'm looking at it right now and it wasn't obvious to me. So I wish that would have been a little bit clearer. You know what I mean?
It wasn't obvious to me either.
Right.
Yeah. Yes, it wasn't. Jim Shooter would not have approved.
Right. He'd make him redo it. So anyway, so then Captain Britain knocks him out. And then he's kind of trying to get away because he has to go change into Brian Braddock, right? So then he flies away. And then, and then basically she's kind of covering up for him. What, a flying man? I didn't see a flying man.
No,
so
if you do want to give a criticism about the art, like I have no forgiveness over the cockeyed look that Betsy has in this one image.
That is weird, yeah. I wonder I wonder if that's just an accident, like bad inking or something. I don't know.
Oh, that's an image of someone having an accident, that's for sure.
Yeah. So anyway, then in the final panel, we're introduced to Arcade, who we know from X-Men.
That's right.
And he must have appeared. He must have appeared in the Captain Britain crossovers, I think, in Marvel Team Up maybe or something. But anyway,
yes, he did Marvel Team Up. Yes.
Okay. So anyway, once again we have an issue where it could have just been something typical. Like if you were to remove all of the text and dialogue, it might just look like a superhero fight, a very well drawn one. But Alan Moore's writing is what gives it this extra dimension. Also, moving over to the narration and the thoughts of Betsy and the other psychic, I think is brilliant. The added comedy of the comic book store, the way that they are fighting each other is brilliant. The thought process that goes through their heads, I just think it's great. Adam, what did you think?
I will confess, I think this was the weakest of the issues we've read from Alan Moore. Only because it is an issue-long fight scene, and I always take umbrage with that to an extent. There's maybe one exception I make for that, and that is actually also an Alan Moore story, which is the Miracle Man fight, which is iconic for a reason. But by and large, oddly enough, for a genre which is so defined by superheroes and villains fighting one another, that tends to be my least favorite thing about said genre.
Me too.
So for that reason particularly, it just didn't appeal to me as much. It was a very cleverly written one, and I will say all the points made about the psychics communicating to one another, the little jokes about the comic shop, I thought that was well done. There's even a poster in the comic book window saying coming soon, Saturnine and the Knights, and it's kind of tied in for the comic book, but it's a reference to what's going to happen upcoming, and also for the character Saturnine earlier in the run. It is a big superhero supervillain brawl, a well done one, but honestly, if you were just told Captain Britain beats the guy, I don't think there's too much to really recommend for me to say that someone needs to read this. All the subsequent issues, absolutely. With that said, though, I didn't grow up with this comic shop, as me visiting it as a young person. So I'm wondering maybe if Nice Man could just say, how accurate is this to the interior of Forbidden Planet? Did it seem to reflect the real world scenario of it?
Yes, but you see, Forbidden Planet has moved. It started off in Denmark Street and then just got bigger and bigger, and I think it moved around to Holborn, High Holborn, and became like a mega store. So, but you know what? If I have any memory, it's funny now that I think about it. If I have any memory of going into Forbidden Planet, which I did a lot on Denmark Street, one that stands out to me is walking in, looking just ahead of me and to the side, seeing a pile of new comics. They weren't all laid out on shelves or whatever, a pile. And what was on top of the pile? The first Frank Miller Daredevil with Elektra.
Nice.
And I looked down at that and I thought, wow. Oh yeah, got to have that. and so that's isn't that funny? That's like maybe my strongest memory there. I wish I could say I even remembered the two guys who worked there who were featured in this story. You see, there's a couple of employees. No, we got to do something. Yeah, but we're not superheroes. We just sell comics. Oh, well, that's true. So you can be sure it was based on a couple of guys who worked there, but I don't recognize them.
Sure.
But that was even the fight. I have to say, it's still better than most superhero slugfests.
I agree. Yes,
because it's in the background as we focus more on the telepaths, and for good reason, because that's ultimately going to be the undoing of Slaymaster. And additionally, Captain Britain has a good little force field around him, which I think is also completely reasonable because, future technology should be able to generate something like this. But the device that Slaymaster has is able to penetrate that thin field. And I think, okay, that's fair enough too. I guess the denouement of the getting the comic books out of Forbidden Planet to slam them into the face of Slaymaster, opening up an opportunity for Captain Britain to pummel him. That's a little bit hokey, but it's all right. It's not meant to be taken too seriously. And at least Slaymaster congratulated him,
Yeah.
So as battles go, yes, I don't enjoy big slugfests either. Rarely.
It's funny because I want to make one comment about that. It might seem like a contradiction to be a superhero fan that doesn't like superhero slugfests, and I've thought about it. And my analogy is, I like police procedurals, but I don't want to watch 30 minutes of someone getting arrested. Right? I like the process of the genre of how they catch the criminal and what they have to do to catch the criminal, but the actual physical arresting is the least interesting part of the story to me. And if it is interesting, it only lasts for 30 seconds. The obsession that superhero fans have with slugfest has always baffled me. And that's also why I think I don't know if we've talked about this, Paul, but that's one reason I like Silver Age DC so much, because they focus so much on story. Like I just read a Supergirl story where the plot of the story was Linda Lee trying to trick a family into adopting another orphan in her orphanage because she thought that other girl deserved a family more than her. That's the story, right? Like that's clever to think of a story and to execute it well. That's clever, but having two people fighting for 20 pages is not clever to me. Anyway.
If there's I will say one other conceit that I have with this, which is the fact that the previous issues seem to have an arc exploring this deconstruction of Captain Britain. First off, the literal deconstruction of him, and then building back up with the questions of what does it mean to die? What does it mean to live, to have a life? Once we have a life, what does it mean to choose to continue living, which has been explored in that issue where he fights the mastermind hologram. Then it is, what does it mean once we choose to live, to have a life? And I think the reconnection with Betsy, his sister, kind of learning to ingratiate himself with this sort of community again, as represented by his sister. You have this almost trajectory of this comic series exploring what does it actually mean to live in a very subtle way, nothing that's too pretentious or overwrought, but just enough to get this idea that Alan Moore is exploring some heady concepts in what could just be a garish superhero book. But this one, I felt the reason I maybe was put out of it was it didn't continue with that.
Sure.
I mean, you could argue maybe part of the progression is he is now working with a larger community. He's learning what it means to be a person, just not fighting a person by himself, but he literally needs help of others in order to defeat the Slaymaster. But I don't feel it was nearly as well written or as intelligent, or that sort of point was gotten across as well. I think in the next issue, we're going to see more of a progress happening, and a great callback to another Alan Moore character. But it just felt like there was this sort of progression that happened that took a bit of a dive in this one. It's not a horrible comic by any stretch of the imagination, but it's just something where it did feel a little bit deflating compared to the great building crescendo that we were leading to, and we hit a bum note before we go to the next part of the composition.
All right. Okay. And with that, we're going to jump to the next issue. And I can summarize this one. This is Daredevils number 5. Again, look at the splash page. We see a character in silhouette standing with a bunch of other characters in front of him. Do I have your attention, ladies and gentlemen? We see a giant panel, Target, Captain Britain. Then at the bottom, good. Here's the plan. What a way to start a story. Brilliant. Anyway. So then, it's all coming back to me. I love this issue. This story is narrated by this guy as, like, he's telling them what they're going to do as the reader is seeing them do it. And basically, we have this group of characters. One guy, his name's Zeitgeist. He can, kind of like Kitty Pryde, he can phase through walls. So we see him phasing through the front door, and we see little Alan Mooreisms, like Zeitgeist will enter through the front door, as would any respectable visitor. The only difference is that in Zeitgeist's case, the door does not need to be open. Just little things like that I love. Then we see Betsy's friend, the psychic, pouring milk, Thomas Lennox, pouring milk. We see Zeitgeist's hands come through the wall, but he's able to make them solid to grab him and then pull his head against the wall to knock him out. It's great. Then we see him floating down into the caverns that we were introduced to 2 issues ago. It's great. He's like, and he's there to sabotage the computer. The computer must be rendered inoperable before the rest of us enter the manor. From this point on, things get hectic. So then we see another character come in, and she is psychically attacking Betsy Braddock by making her see all time at once, right? Because that's her superpower, Cobweb. Mm-hmm. She has the ability to see time all at the same time, and so she's giving that to Betsy Braddock to basically disorientate her. It's great. Then let's see. Then with Miss Braddock out of the way, there'll be no further obstacles between us and the target. So then they go in, and again, there's some nice little narration here where he says, they're talking about Captain Britain. He can fly. He's capable of inhuman strength and endurance. His senses are acute to the point of being uncanny. Being a gentleman, he does not sleep with his clothes on. Not being a gentleman, I propose we take advantage of that fact. That's great. So then he wakes up, sees them all standing there, and then we see this splash page of them all, and he's like, my name is War Dog. Please consider yourself a prisoner of the special executive. It's a great shot. He jumps up, grabs his clothes, runs out of the room. They try to follow him. Now he's got his clothes on. And they then say, our employer is currently incarcerated, accused of a crime that she did not commit. Only your testimony can save her. So he says, well, why didn't you say so in the first place? So basically, they've come here to recruit him to help him save someone, but they don't reveal who it is just yet. Then they say it's Saturnine, who he was fighting in the story arc before Alan Moore joined, but we came in the middle of when we started our review. So he's like, why do you think I would want to do that? So then he punches him. And basically then the golden skinned woman named, what's her name again? Is this Cobweb? I don't remember her name.
No, that's not Cobweb.
No.
She has a name that I think David Bowie fans would appreciate, Fascination.
Okay. And basically, again, using the medium kind of like distorts time around her and breaks down like his mind. Yeah, and basically knocks him out. So they pick him up, they carry him away, and then that's basically it. They walk out, and then they teleport away, and then that's the end of the issue. But, again, a simple, very straightforward story, but in my opinion, brilliantly done. And this trope of narrating the action as it's happening, I've only seen done one other place, and that's, of course, G.I. Joe the movie, which is the 5th best movie ever made. I'm sure it's been done in other places, like maybe Mission Impossible or something. But anyway, I thought this issue was great. Nice Man, what did you think?
Yeah, nice. Well, nice. I shouldn't say nice. Distinctive characters, interesting narration. This time, it's a War Dog narrating.
Right.
But it's still narration, and really, this is what Alan Moore does so well. When you have narration like this, you don't need a whole load of word balloons and thought balloons. The narration, skillfully written narration, does so well. Really like the distinctive characters and the twist about, we just want you to help Saturnine, which of course he doesn't want to do. And then we have the ending to the chapter with the character. Again, what's the golden skin character's name? What's her name?
Fascination.
Fascination. Yeah, that's right. An old Human League song. And then to the way she looks, the way she acts, she seems so harmless, so harmless. But all she has to do is get her hands by his head, and as it said, time distorts around her, motion breaks down into juddering, stroboscopic images. And then the art is great, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Here?
It is.
I mean, I think this is what Alan Davis does really, really well.
Agreed.
I had no criticism whatsoever of that kind of stuff. Producing images that correspond to juddering stroboscopic images. And so he's like down for the count and again, and off they take him. But where are they going to take him? That's the thing. So, it's interesting. They're not typical bad guys. They just want him to come and help Saturnine, which I guess they knew he wasn't going to just do lightly, and that's why we have the action that we have. But it's not boring. It's not like a boring slugfest. It's much more intriguing than that.
Mm-hmm.
This reminds me so much of maybe a good American or UK heist film where you do hear the narration of what's going to happen as they break into a facility. You can think of anything from, as you said, Mission Impossible to the Italian Job and see kind of precedents for that here. And it's done exceptionally well as a genre experiment for Alan Moore doing essentially a heist film within a half a comic. It's fantastic.
Right.
And, it'd be remiss not to mention that we have actually seen Special Executive before, because they were within Doctor Who Monthly when Alan Moore created the War Dog character. If you're not mistaken about this, Mike, you'll recall how War Dog had lost his arm in one of those issues.
Oh my gosh!
And here he is with one of his limbs replaced by a metallic robotic limb instead as a prosthetic. So this is a callback to these characters who appeared in Doctor Who Monthly, reintroduced, and now becoming fully fledged Marvel Comics characters.
Wow, I did not realize that. Jeez. Okay, interesting. And again, there's so much attention focused on Miracle Man, and it deserves it. But Alan Moore was also doing this stuff at almost the same time. Doctor Who, Captain Britain. He was doing Warp Smiths, I think, maybe something else. Like, it all deserves to be reprinted, and made plentiful, so that people have access to it. Right? Anyway,
I agree. In terms of the dialogue, every character stands out. They have a personality. The powers are more than just excuses to show great art. Like, they really do show the plot. They show different elements about the supporting cast of characters. And you do see the great ability of Captain Britain as well, because at this point, yes, he's required help to basically win his fights or to achieve any success so far in these battles. Like, you've seen that happen in the subsequent issues, or I should say the preceding issues, pardon me. With that said, though, what happens here is the special executive, they don't know what Captain Britain's going to do. They have been able to map out and plan every single element of this break-in up until this point. And again, Captain Britain defies all expectation of doing all things, leaping up, grabbing his costume, putting it on, and he manages to actually bludgeon Cobweb. So he actually manages to start getting the upper hand on this group. And if it was not for War Dog saying, "Oh, we're actually here to ask for your assistance," I mean, this could have ended with Captain Britain taking down these individuals one by one, arguably. Thankfully, it did not devolve into a slugfest. It instead became kind of a great espionage mystery, and what a great reintroduction for these characters as well. I don't know if either of you recall, I despised War Dog's character when we were first introduced to him. He was too gross and horny for me. I did not care for him. Here it's like, oh no, he's like a comparable leader. He's a little bit callous, but those more toxic, gross traits of his aren't emphasized here. And I don't know what will happen in the upcoming issues of Captain Britain, but I'm very excited. I have to say, I don't know if it's on par with what I've read in Miracle Man or Marvel Man, whichever iteration you want to name, but certainly you see the threads are there, and I think this is peak Alan Moore. If what we saw in the earlier issues of his writing on Doctor Who showed a developing writer, this is him fully fledged.
Agreed. Can't argue with that. Okay, we're going to jump to the next chapter. Wait, is there?
No, we're not.
That's it? Oh, that's it. That's the end, folks. Sorry, we were going to go one more, but we're not going to. We're only going to cover X-Men Archives number 2 and 3. We're going to have to get to the other issues in a future episode of UK Corral, unfortunately. But yeah, these are, considering these are only 5 to 8 pages long, they're very dense. I guess, I don't know if there's anything else you guys want to say before we wrap up.
Yes.
Nice, man. Go ahead.
You were talking about other things that he was doing at that time, which people may not be aware of. His favorite was the Ballad of Halo Jones.
Ah.
In 2000 AD. He did that with Ian Gibson.
Okay. And I have the issues, but I've never read it. Are you insinuating we should review it on UK Corral?
No insinuation.
All right. It's just going to be done. Hey, you don't have to convince me. Trust me, I have spent the last, 30 years trying to get every single thing Alan Moore's ever done.
Yeah.
Just about there. I might not have Maxwell the Cat. I don't think I have that, but I have just about everything else.
So you have Future Shocks and Skiz and...
I have Skiz, Future Shocks. I have DR and Quinch.
Yep. Very good.
Yes.
So you have Halo Jones?
Yes, I do.
Oh, you do. That's right. Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
Impressive.
Yep. Oops. But anyway, on that note, we are going to be trying to cover as much of this stuff as possible. So yeah, I want to thank you guys this week for joining me again. Adam, you have anything else to say?
I'm just going to say I was skeptical going into this, not because of Alan Moore, of course, premier writer, but just the character of Captain Britain. I've been exposed to him a bit in Excalibur and some other works and never really cared for him. If you were a cynic like me, get into these trades, these omnibuses, because I think what Alan Moore did here is exceptional. You will not scrutinize Captain Britain if you read these. You will understand what a great, I won't even say great character, but what a great world surrounds Captain Britain. You know what? Maybe this goes against a little bit of what I said, but to me, what's fascinating here isn't even the character of him, it's the world he envelops. And Alan Moore is great for writing characters, but he's also exceptional at creating these vast worlds that I'm utterly fascinated by. And I don't think anyone who is just as fascinated in any of those titles that were mentioned would be disappointed with this. It's great.
Excellent. Okay, so now to follow up, nice man, I hope you can stick with us for this one. We're going to be doing Grant Morrison, but Grant Morrison on G.I. Joe. Action Force.
Action Force.
Yes.
Grant
However, Grant Morrison Action Force, but it's going to be a short one because he only did 2 short stories. So it's going to be a short episode, but that's okay. You know, this one was a long one. The last one was a long one, so it'll be a little break.
When you say 2 short stories, do you mean 2 short arcs or do you mean 2 short issues?
I mean 2 5-pagers.
I'm down for that.
Yeah. Okay. So it'll be a short episode next week, but it'll be a fun one. Grant Morrison's Action Force. Be sure to join us. Every episode's available at comicbooksyndicate.com. We're going to review as many really good UK stories by good UK writers. We'll try to cover everything, but obviously that's impossible. We'll do our best. Anyway,
maybe we'll do some bad ones too. Who knows?
We'll do some bad ones. I'm sure there'll be some Steve Parkhouse in there somewhere. But anyway, no offense to Steve Parkhouse. Okay. See you guys next week. Bye.